with it. 10 parts wood ashes and rice straw ashes with 1 part salt. Because salt was very expensive, and so they would cut it, just like a drug dealer cuts expensive cocaine with flour, so that it would last longer. So they got plant minerals in 3 different ways. As fertilizer in the garden, culinary ashes, mix it in their noodles and rice, and also by cutting their salt with it. And wood ashes and rice straw ashes are the plant minerals that are left when you burn away the carbon in the fuel. And people have been using plant minerals as a supplement since before written history. We know this from the Neanderthals. They were the first people to consciously bury their loved ones when they died, and they always put little pots of wood ashes with them. They never figured out why. Well, wood ashes are plant minerals. They make you live longer. What a concept, make you healthier. And then they said one thing I didn't know. They said, and lastly, an ash merchant came by every morning. An ash merchant. Now, what does that tell you? An ash merchant came by every morning and would buy our excess wood ashes and our excess rice straw ashes, and they would sell these ashes to farmers who had fields that were much larger than their personal production of ash could fertilize. It was an industry because they knew it was important for fertilization of that field. The first patent in 1790, the first U.S. patent number 1, was how to make white wood ashes for export. They were burning tens of thousands of acres of forests. They just set those forests on fire and collect the wood ashes and ship them to England. That's because England had burned every tree on the British Isles. They were forced to go to coal, which they hated because of the smoke and all that kind of stuff. And because they burnt every tree, they were forced to use coal as a fuel. But after the first 2 years of mining coal, the mines flooded with water, and the king formed what he called the Royal Society to find a way to pump the water out of the mines. And they came up with a steam engine to pump the water out of the mines. And that started the Industrial Revolution because they'd burnt every tree. And so they were using the wood ashes from America for their food and their garden fertilizer and cutting their salt with it. And all this information is in the book Hell's Kitchen, a lot of detail. Now here's a little different recipe for those of you who are sports fans. May 2001, Harold Stilson from Deerfield Beach, Florida, hits a hole-in-one on his 101st birthday. Went out to play golf on his 101st birthday, hits a hole-in-one, 108-yard par 3 hole. I mean, Tiger Woods hasn't hit a hole-in-one in I don't know how long. This was his sixth one. Now you have to have good enough vision to see that stick holding up the flag at 108 yards. You got to have a good grip on the club, good eye-hand coordination. Hit that little banty chicken egg-sized ball into a teacup-sized hole 108 yards away in one whack. Wouldn't you rather have that lifestyle than being in a nursing home at age 85? Hooah! And you know he doesn't have Alzheimer's disease because he's color-coordinated. How many remember Art Linkletter? Okay, most of you are old enough to remember him. He wanted to live to be 100, and he was moved to want to live to be 100 by reading a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel by the title Lost Horizon. Many of you won't remember that title, but the author, James Hilton, the one who won the Pulitzer Prize for writing that novel, coined a term in that book, Lost Horizon, called Shangri-La. How many of you heard of the term Shangri-La? Sure, everybody remembers that one. It was a mythical place you could live to be 200-300 years of age if you followed their lifestyle, very clean-cut lifestyle. Everybody had their own little garden. They put wood ashes in, and they did all kinds of other stuff, as you're going to see in a minute. And this novel was actually written about real people called the Hunzas who live in what's now northern Pakistan. They were so famous for health and longevity. They were the longest lived and the healthiest people on earth. And so even the King of England sent his personal physician, one Sir Robert McCarrison, to go there for 4 years. Went there for 4 years to study how they lived so long and take the information back to the king. And Robert McCarrison was such a scientist, he brought 4,000 white rats with him. And he set up 1,000 rats on the Hunza diet, 1,000 rats on the New Delhi diet, and 1,000 rats on the English diet. Well, during that 4 years, the English rats died of the most horrible diseases, became cannibals and ate each other. And the New Delhi rats lived a little bit longer, but they didn't serve much any better. They had all diabetes and high blood pressure and all that, died of liver cancer. But the Hunza rats, they had to kill them at the end of the 4 years. It's time to leave. None of them died. It was wonderful. So he came back and he said, King, he says, I don't know what it is, but it has something to do with the diet. He told the king about the experiment he'd run. And so he says, here's a list of everything the Hunzas eat. And the king ate exactly as the Hunzas ate, and the king died at 72. Well, Art Linkletter hired an eye doctor by the name of Alan Bannock to go to Hunza and find out what their secret was. Alan Bannock was an eye doctor, but he was also an amateur farmer, and he didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but he went and he wrote down everything. How they tied their turban, how many steps they took each day, how much they slept, how much water they drank, how much the volume of their pee, how many times they went to the number 2. And he said, I don't know, but Art, here's all the information, pick what you want. Of course, Alan Bannock's dead, and Art Linkletter just celebrated his 94th birthday on Larry King a couple of months ago. At any rate, to make a long story short, there's 2 things in this book that jump out at you. Number 1, they farm at 19,500-foot elevation. Their growing season is only 45 days. Now, the wheat and the corn and the rice we use, the growing season is 110 to 140 days. Can you grow those crops with a 45-day growing season? Nah. And so their total carbohydrate intake, because they couldn't grow rice and wheat as we know it, and corn and that sort of stuff, squash and things, their sum total of their carbohydrate intake was a little chapati bread the size of a silver dollar pancake, 1 per person per day. That was it. The rest of their diet consisted of goat meat, lamb, mutton, chickens, eggs, cheese, butter, maybe some tomatoes and some green peppers and onions and garlic. And so it was a very low carbohydrate, very high animal fat, very high animal protein diet. And we know from animal experiments that when you have a low carbohydrate diet, you can double and triple lifespans of animals if you give them all the nutrients. It's called undernutrition without malnutrition. You have to triple the vitamins and minerals and cut the carbohydrate intake by 2/3, and you'll triple their lifespan. Cut the carbohydrate intake, triple the vitamins and minerals, and we can triple their lifespan. It's that easy. And number 2, he noted in this book very clearly that they took their wood ashes every morning and mixed it in their garden. They cut their food with it and their salt with it. They put in their food as culinary ashes and cut their salt with it. Kind of like the Okinawans. Isn't that amazing? This is a beautiful story. It really gives you some insight. Milan and I were changing planes in Houston, Texas in July of 2004, and there's this wonderful article in the Houston Chronicle. It was about the discovery of natural gas in Bolivia, a country in South America. And they were arguing, who's going to get the money? The indigenous people, the Native Americans, so to speak, or the Native South Americans, or the government? They were arguing about this. But the most important thing of this article to me was this picture and the little legend underneath this picture. It said, Bruno Paza, one of Bolivia's indigenous Amara Indians, holds a bowl of llama manure he's using to feed his cooking fire. Does that look like a GE kitchen, ladies? It's a little 1 foot by 2 foot cast iron stove. Look at all the soot on the walls. He needs spring cleaning bad. It's cold in there. If you've ever been in a cabin with a fireplace, your front end is cooking and your back end is cold. He's got 3 shirts, a sweatshirt, a parka, his ear flaps are down in his house. And he's feeding his fire. His fuel is animal manure. Did Americans ever use animal manure as fuel? Absolutely. Buffalo chips. Do you think they came to Vegas to get buffalo chips? There's no trees on the prairie, so they use horse manure. And they send the kids out with buckets to get all the road apples and stuff like that, And so we burned animal manure as fuel. Bundles of grass, trees, wood, all kinds of stuff. No indoor plumbing, no electricity, no hospitals, no clinics, no doctors, no pharmacies, no pharmacists, no pharmaceuticals, no drugs, no Social Security, no insurance, no Blue Cross Blue Shield, no HMOs. They got nothing you would go there for. So what makes them interesting to me was when you look at the book Rare Earths Forbidden Cures and you go to the chapter entitled The Age Beaters, not the egg beaters, but the age beaters, the people that live around Lake Titicaca, Bolivia, Peru, and Chile in this area have more 100-year-olds per population than anybody else in the world. 1 per 500. In America, we have 1 per 10,000. They have 20 times the 100-year-olds we do. Think about that. They have nothing that you would go there for, other than long life and happiness. Now, this remained the same. This remained the same since before written history until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882. We know the exact moment when everything changed. Monday, September 4th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 1882, when this guy came along. Well, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, Thomas Edison pulled the switch and turned on the first commercial. Actually, he didn't do it. His chief electrical technician, a guy by the name of Jonathan Leaves, pulled on the switch and turned on the first commercial electric generating plant in the world. By 1909, there was no less than a dozen patented kitchen electrical appliances. The first one was a toaster, interestingly enough, then a skillet. There were rice cookers and crock pots and blenders and steam irons and all kinds of electrical appliances. By 1950, every city and every industrialized nation had completely given up wood as a fuel and had gone to electricity and propane and natural gas and liquid paraffin and kerosene and heating oils for heating and cooking. Here comes the most profound question you've ever had in your life, other than being proposed to, ladies. How many wood ashes are left over when you cook and heat with electricity and propane and liquid paraffin and natural gas? It's a numeral that looks like this and begins with a Z. 0! And there was no great gathering of doctors. There was no great gathering of doctors wringing their hands saying, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? People have been using wood ashes as a source of nutritional minerals since before written history. And now suddenly in the space of just 70 years, after thousands and thousands of years of using wood ashes and rice straw ashes and peat moss ashes as fertilizer and supplements in our food as culinary ashes and cutting our salt with it, in a 70-year period, just a little blip on the radar, it's gone. And nobody said, well, where are we going to get our minerals? Doctors didn't do that. They just, whoa, this is exciting, electricity. Now we can get brighter lights in the surgery room. There was no congressional hearings. There was no Senate investigations. There was nothing going on. And now we're paying the price. Now we're paying the price. Because all the epidemics, which we're going to talk about here, of degenerative diseases are caused by mineral deficiencies. Here's another one of my favorites. Ralph Charles, back in October of 1999, turned 100. And nice little newspaper write-up on his 100th birthday. And the thing that was interesting to me was he was still piloting commercial charter flights at age 100. Had no restrictions on his health paper licenses. Didn't have Alzheimer's disease. Didn't have macular degeneration. No cataracts. Does he look like that recipe of a 100-year-old? No, he looks like he's in his 80s to me. He looks 20 years younger than his age. And so these are things we know. We can fly airplanes at 100. We can hit holes in one at 101 if we follow the right recipe. I'll show you two more here, and then we'll get on with the meat of this thing. This gal here, Connie Douglas Reeves, back in September of 2002, turned 101. And the day that she turned 101, they inducted her into the Cowgirl Hall of Fame because she had taught 30,000 young women how to ride Western saddle and how to barrel race. I mean, she's a legend in Texas. And they inaugurated her and inducted her into the Cowgirl Hall of Fame. Now, to me, she looks like one of those mean, feisty, rebellious patients. She's got her thumbs in her belt, her shoulders are back, her chin is up. You can just imagine her doctor saying to her, Connie, I need you to give up salt. Now you're 101. I got to worry about your blood pressure.